He said, I sought knowledge and I was able to gain some. But I tried to find adab and to learn it, and I found that its people had passed away. The Basmala, Alhamdulillah, Rububiyyah, Al-Jihad, Tawbah, Fada'il Al-A'mal, As-Salah, Tarbiyah, As-Saghair wal-Kabair. Ilallah. Alright? Which action is most beloved? Which of the actions is most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And we have many other narrations of such a similar question. What is the best action? What is the afdal amal? What is the best action that you can find, that we can do? What is the most beloved action to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Change the words a bit, but the meaning remains the same. And what does that question actually mean when someone asks that? Okay, look at the answer here. We've seen that when Ibn Mas'ud answered that, the Prophet ﷺ didn't mention Iman, didn't mention those things which we know are before prayer, but he mentioned prayer, and then he mentioned Birrul Walidain, and then he mentioned Jihad. Okay, and you will realize, once you study all of the different types of hadith, and start to understand the question and the responses, what this kind of question, or rather, how the questioner dealt with this kind of approach. And that's why the scholars said that sometimes when someone asks this question, what they mean is that in general, what are the best actions? In general. That's the first opinion. The second opinion is that when someone would ask, what is the most beloved action according to Allah, and then the responses were given, in order to exaggerate the action to show its importance and its magnitude, by connecting it to the question that what is the greatest action, to give it and underline its importance. Another opinion was that the questioner would change, and because the question only arises, our confusion only arises because the answer is always changing. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, they said, who is the best of us? And he would say, خيركم خير لأهليكم, for example, one time. The best of you are those who are best to their families. And another time, the best of you, best to your children, and the best to your women, and the best who make ada, who pay the debts, and those who perform the prayer upon the right time. So all these different responses. So they said that one of the answers to this is that the one who's answering the question is more knowledgeable of the exact needs of that questioner, and is responding with something that will specifically benefit that person more than it would someone else. And this makes a lot of sense. This makes a lot of sense because sometimes we'll read something and we don't know the further detail, that maybe the questioner knows that this person is very good in giving sadaqah and very good in fasting and so on, but his prayer is lacking. So then he will concentrate upon the prayer, and he will tell him, this is the greatest action that you can do. And this is one of the possible answers. Another one of the answers that the scholars mentioned was that it differs from time to time. So in certain times, certain actions are the most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at other times, other actions. Such as jihad, for example. In the beginning of Islam, jihad, its maqam was incredible. Why? Because it was needed as a wasila, it was needed as a mode and a means to establish Islam in itself. But once Islam was established and the state had achieved security and stability, so now the importance of jihad, although still there, although still an obligation, but now something else may come in front of it. For example, a person who hasn't done Hajj and it's time now for Hajj, okay, well jihad now, we're stable, we're secure, so Hajj is now the greatest action that you can do. Or for example, we're safe and stable and secure, and there is a massive drought and a famine. So now sadaqah becomes the thing which is emphasized. And this is how to understand the hundreds of narrations and answers that we have, where the Prophet ﷺ would say the greatest action according to Allah, the most beloved action according to Allah is this and that, and so on and so on. So now there's no need to be confused when you see all the different answers, because you can see them, that they are differing in their time, differing according to the person who is asking the question, and so on. So then we move to the first thing that the Prophet ﷺ told Ibn Mas'ud. What was that? As-salat. As-salah ala waqtiha. The prayer in its proper time. And there are many, many different narrations of this hadith. Okay, the most popular second narration is as-salah fi awwali waqtiha, the prayer in the beginning of its time. And this was disputed amongst the scholars of fiqh, particularly, for example, Imam al-Nawawi. In general, it was the Hanafi school that didn't find any evidence for this statement. And it was actually Imam al-Nawawi who supported them. In his book, he said that actually all of the narrations that have this increase, al-awwal, yani in the beginning of its time, are weak. But Ibn Hajar, rahimullah, he shows in actual fact that the narrations for this are authentic, and they are to be found with Hakim, and they are found with Daraqutni, and they are found in the Sahih of Ibn Khuzaymah, rahimahumullah. And it is something which is an authentic addition, which can help us to understand the hadith. But even this, even understanding and knowing that to pray the salah in its beginning time is not necessarily the one and only interpretation. Because we know from other ahadith that not always is the prayer at the beginning of its time the best. For example, when we have a congregation, so let's just say that the salah starts at 4 o'clock. So then if you were to act literally upon as-salah fi awwali waqtiha, then you'd pray at 4 or 4. But what if you know that the congregation's at 5 o'clock? Then we know that the jama'ah, the congregation in the masjid, is more of an obligation and a better prayer for you. And for example, we know Salatul Isha, the Prophet ﷺ wanted to delay that prayer as much as possible, except that he feared that it would become too difficult for his nation. So if someone has the ability, they should delay it. But if the jama'ah is earlier in the masjid, then he prays with the masjid earlier. But if he's at home or she is at home, it is sunnah for them, if they can, as long as it will not affect the prayer adversely. They'll get too tired, they don't know what they're saying, and so on and so on, to delay the Isha prayer and pray it as late as possible. And not only does this hadith give us this discussion now of whether the prayer itself is in the beginning time, whether it's in the later time, what is this proper time, it also tells us in this list of 3 things, and you just have to step back and look at the list: salah, birrul walidain, and jihad fi sabilillah. 3 great obligations, yet the prayer comes first out of all 3. We're still talking about parents, yet the salah is placed at the beginning. Why? Because it really is a priority in our lives. It really is the number one thing that should take priority over everything. And we know that from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when he said in the Tirmidhi, the first thing that will be judged on Yawm al-Qiyamah will be the prayer. And if the prayer is proper, then the rest of the deeds inshallah will follow. And it will be along that line and it will be successful. But if the prayer is defective, the quality of the prayer is defective, then the rest of the actions are surely going to then be defective. That's why, at the beginning of all of our priorities is the prayer. And what we need to ask ourselves in this hadith when we read it, is how do we compare to those people who did make the prayer their priority? Are we like the Sahaba? When we look at our prayer, does our prayer become the only and single most important thing in our day, around which our day revolves, around which our day is decided about what we'll do, what we'll not do? Or do we actually have a day that we have things to do, that we have work to carry out, and then the prayer fits in where we can, whether it's in the beginning of its time or the late end of its time, and so on and so on. How do we compare? If you look at the Sahabas, if you look at the reaction and the understanding of the Sahaba when it comes to Salah, look at the hadith of Dajjal. Now you know all about the Masih al-Dajjal, the greatest fitna that will come, that will afflict us. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ said that there never came a prophet who did not warn his nation, his people against Masih al-Dajjal. That didn't do it. Every single prophet emphasized this fitna, this great fitna. And how much more emphasis do we want? The Prophet ﷺ taught us to make in the Qur'an, to make in the day 20, 30, 40, 50 times a day in our salah. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhab al-qabr, min adhab jahannam, wa min adhab sharri fitnat al-Masih al-Dajjal. Repeatedly we are told to seek refuge from the adhab of the qabr, the punishment of the grave, and the punishment of the Jahannam, and then the evil fitna, the dangerous fitna of Al-Masih al-Dajjal, the Antichrist. Why? And do you know anything about al-Dajjal? This entity that will come, that will make these false miracles, that will totally bamboozle the minds of everyone who comes to see. And they will take him like God. They will take, the Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause drought and will cause famine. And the Dajjal will come and he will give water and he will cause rain to come down. So there will be no food and then he will give food. There will be no water and he will give water. He will make it appear. There will be people who will be dead, he will bring them to life. There is a person who has nothing, he's dying and desperate to save his family. And his animal is dead. And his camel is dead. And the Dajjal will then make his camel come alive. And then a person will come and they will say, my parents are dead. Your parents. Now think about this. Those people that you love most, those people that when they pass away, it hurts them most. It hurts you most. The most painful death is the parents. And the Dajjal will say, shall I bring them back for you? And they said, well, yeah, okay. And the hadith is like, well, go on then, almost like a challenge. And then he does. And then he does. Can you imagine that kind of fitna? Can you imagine being in that situation? Where there is someone who's going around and causing the dead to come back to life, to causing the one that you love so much to come back to life? And so the Prophet ﷺ then comes and says that, I warn you about Dajjal, and he will come, and he will stay with you for 40 days, and the first day will be like a year, and the second day will be like a month, and the third day will be like a week, and then the rest of the days will be like your days. Can you imagine this time? And the Prophet ﷺ said, in these days, a person will wake up a believer, and he will die a disbeliever. Can you imagine that time? The chaos and the confusion and the stress and the mayhem. And so what do you think that the Prophet, when the companions heard this, what were they going to ask for? What did they say? What dua should we learn? How are we going to protect ourselves? What are we going to do that day? Do you know what they said? How will we pray that day? How are we going to perform our salah that day? That's the difference between the Sahaba and us. That's the difference about people who prioritize different things. The world is falling down. People are being killed left, right and center. People don't know whether they're going to wake up a believer or a kafir. The world order has changed totally. And what did the Sahaba say? How are we going to perform the first and most obligatory right to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that day? How on earth are we going to do that on a day which has changed so the time cannot be understood? That's what prayer is to these people, radiyallahu anhum. That's the difference between them and us. That's something that we need to now concentrate on and think about. Where is their salah, where are their priorities, and where is our salah, and where are our priorities? And really, and that's the great thing about this hadith, actually. If you look at it in the way that it is listing these things in priority of virtue and in priority of goodness, we should also think, are these actions for us also in priority, in a list of priority? Do we prioritize that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants priority to be given to? And which the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give priority to? Because if we do, then we'll also be able to then achieve not only the happiness, but ease in being able to take care of the rest of our priorities. Because the one who is able to deal with the prayer, and perfect the obligation of the prayer upon its time and upon the responsibilities, upon the Muslim to deal with the prayer, then he will find that all other difficulties are just nothing by the way, just to be pushed away. إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ. The Prophet ﷺ said that really the prayer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an, that the salah, it repels, it prohibits fahsha, open evil actions, and munkar, just evil sins in society. And that's by which you do. Can you see the link? By prioritizing what Allah prioritizes, what the Prophet ﷺ prioritizes, then we will find ease in the rest of our actions. So when we see that the salah is given this importance in our life, and put top of the list, before birrul walidain, and before jihad fi sabilillah in its right time, then we will be able to take the benefit from that prayer, and have it repel al-fahsha wal-munkar, and make it easy upon us to then go and fulfill and meet out the rest of our obligations, such as the obligations to the parents. That's the link that the ulama used to say. And then Ibn Uyayna radiallahu anh, in the tafsir of this ayah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it is when He describes the obligation of serving the parents, by this wasiyah, this obligation in joining the Muslims to obey the parents, He said that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that make shukr to me waliwalidayk, and ishkuruli waliwalidayk, give thanks to me and give thanks to your parents. How is this done? How is this done? By performing the 5 prayers, then you have thanked Allah. And by making dua for your parents after these 5 prayers, you have thanked them. This is how the scholars used to look at the ayat of obligations to the parents and be able to understand it, in being able to facilitate them in carrying out